Okay, yeah, I wanted to make sure you saw it. Okay.
The volume of water that's coming out there, you used to be able to sort through. I want to see gas.
Call to order the public committee meeting for the town of Madisonville, Wednesday, January 28th, 2026. Would you call the roll, please?
Councilman Haddocks.
Present.
Councilman Bounds.
Present.
Councilman Dennis.
Present.
Councilwoman Faison.
Present.
Councilman Ogle.
Present.
Mayor Pelot.
Present. Would you please silence your phone, stand for the Pledge of Allegiance by Councilman Haddocks.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Outset of the meeting is a public comment period. Members of the audience will have 3 minutes to make a statement or express a concern. Is anyone here to do that?
I didn't, but I want to hear his report first.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
So, kind of the same thing.
Introduce yourself.
I'm sorry, John Brewster, 105 Random Park Street. So I also want to hear the report, but I did read it, and I had several questions. So in reading it, it talked about...
Why don't you wait for your questions until he gives his report?
Okay, I'll make a statement then, and I have some material for each one of you guys, just for your consideration. I did quite a bit of work on the internet, looking at well rehabilitation and well maintenance work, so I have some interesting data I think that each one of you will like to see. The other thing I would say is, I just want to put it on record that I think before we endeavor on such a expensive water well and water tower, that it should all be based on data, right? I think that should be a number one requirement. We should do a cost benefits analysis. And I would like to propose that we put that to a vote to the citizens, should we decide to spend that much money on a new water well and water tower, where the citizens are going to have a meter at their house and probably triple or more their water bill. So anyway, let me give you this information that you can look at. I printed some stuff out for you.
Anyone else here to speak to the council? Okay, seeing no one else, we'll move into the meeting agenda. The Finance Committee is the first thing on the agenda. Committee members, Councilman Bounds, Councilman Haddocks. The first thing on the agenda is a Madisonville new well elevated storage tank investigation and the report. And David, if you would approach introduce yourself and present your report, your findings.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, members of the council, mayor, and citizens of Madisonville. Thank you for having me here tonight. I appreciate it. This is always a challenging endeavor. You know, when you start to look at this kind of stuff, so no doubt there's going to be public interest, and that's a good thing. I'm just going to run over at a very high level the findings here. I think everyone around is pretty familiar with what's going on, so I anticipate questions more than needing to explain it from scratch. But
David,
yes, sir.
would you just mind telling everyone what your background is and how many years of experience you have in this field?
I will. Yeah, my name's David Kozan. I'm with Owen & White Engineers in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. I've been doing drinking water treatment for 30 years roughly now. Both production, treatment, transmission, hydraulic modeling, all the things that line up with your needs here. So I've been doing it for a while in this part of the world, most of that time.
Thank you.
Sure. So it came to the attention of the leaders of the town that there are some issues that need consideration in the drinking water system. And I'm not connected completely to the history of it, but there were a couple things that came up that needed attention. One of which is the fact that one of your wells produces some dissolved manganese. That's a middle of the ground up to a certain level. Doesn't have any known health effects. At very high levels it does. But it has an annoying habit of staining things. It creates an aesthetic effect that's problematic. At higher levels, it can be a health effect. We haven't seen any levels that high in the wells you guys have, but I think you're aware that it does create brown water, speckled water. It's been variously described like that. You have another well, you have two wells that are in active service. One is what I call the north well, and some people call it the old Ponchatoula well, I believe. Correct me of the names if you need to. And you have another well in the south on Pine Street that I call in my report the south well. The well in the north has a capacity of about 490 gallons a minute, the one in the south about 210. The good water appears to be in the south well, and the manganese-laden water appears to be in the north well. It's very difficult to predict exactly where you're going to hit water with manganese or not. We've worked in wells in this area, and you can drill a well one place, you get some manganese or you get some iron, you move over not too far, you're in a pocket of good water, you don't see that. So unless you drill the well or drill one very close to another well, it's not readily predictable. And I say that to say that whoever picked the site of the north well, that was a reasonable, selection for a well site. It just happened to come up with manganese in it. So the number one is the manganese. Number two issue is the capacity and the decrease in capacity of the south well. The south well produces 210 gallons per minute. Your average day use is a little over 180 gallons per minute. The state requires that you have two wells, one of which has to be able to support the average daily use if the largest well is out of service. You currently meet that criteria because if your big well goes down, your smaller one has the capacity to meet your average day. If that capacity of the smaller well continues to decrease, that won't be the case. It is an artesian well. That means that the water pressure under the ground forces the water up to above the ground surface. So it doesn't behave exactly like normal wells do, but when the capacity decreases, you can rehabilitate the well or attempt to rehabilitate the well and increase its capacity. The challenge you run into there is that the well itself is over 60 years old. So in the water conditions that you have, which is relatively soft water, I by rule of thumb, would say that well needs to be considered for replacement at 50 years. And it would have a lifespan between 50 and 70 years. And once it starts failing underground, most rehabilitation techniques decrease its capacity. They don't increase it. So it's a real challenge to rehabilitate successfully an old well. Not that it can't be tried, but it's expensive and its payback is not what I would recommend you do. I'd recommend you bite the bullet and start with a new well. So you have two things driving you towards a new well. If you drill a well big enough in the south area and you hit a spot with no manganese, then you can use that as what I would call your duty well. So the larger well can supply the town most of the time, and the manganese problem you've had stops, okay, mostly, and we'll talk about that in more than 1 minute. The well in the north could be used as a standby well. So if you have some kind of emergency condition, the southern well fails, for some reason goes offline, electrical problem or whatever, you could still run the north well. You put manganese in the system, but the water's perfectly good to drink. It creates a problem that you can take care of by flushing or other means of mitigation. It doesn't take the town offline. You still have water to drink and everything's fine. If you do that, if you do install a well in the south, it wasn't clear just by looking whether the pipe network in the town would support that without significant improvements. So you would have to not only add a well, but substantial improvements in the town for pipelines. That's pretty expensive, particularly in an area that's developed pretty closely like the town of Madisonville is. It's hard to do that. The town asked us to take a look at that, the hydraulic modeling, and make a mathematical model of the pipes you have, and see what would happen if you put that larger well in the south spot in your Pine Street. We did that, and we find, to our delight, that you don't have a serious piping problem. Now, I'm going to talk about that a little more in a minute, too. You have adequate piping to get the water away from that well for drinking water conditions. So you can run your max day with drinking water conditions with that well online, and your piping network will provide adequate pressure. So if you look at changes to the system by doing that, and so you can imagine right now you've got one in the north and one in the south, and the system works great. If you take away the everyday use of the north well and instead move the bulk of your capacity to the south, what happens? Well, if all you're doing is drinking water, even on a very hot day, and people are watering yards and all that, no problem. If you have a fire, the hydraulic conditions change a little bit. The northwest corner, because it's a little higher part of the town, sees reduced fire flow capacities. Now, fire flow was not necessarily actually it wasn't scoped in our study, but it would be just remiss if we didn't tell you this. So we went ahead and looked at that and said, hey, in this part of the town, you're going to have a little bit of reduced fire flow capacity. That in and of itself is not a real problem, because then you could turn on the north well if you had a fire in that area and operate and support that without piping improvements. Now, you could make piping improvements to bring it nearly to where it was with the well operating in the north as well, but those are expensive. So the reason I say that is the point I put off just a second ago about what happens when you pump into the system from the south well. Right now, you have what are called hydrodynamic tanks. You have some pressure tanks, one next to the north well and one next to the south well. And those tanks have air in them and water, and the air is under pressure, so the well pumps into the tank and squeezes that air, and it acts like a shock absorber. So if the well cuts off, the air wants to uncompress and push the water back out into the system. So what happens is the well doesn't have to run every time in the middle of the night somebody gets up and gets a glass of water. The water can come out of the hydrodynamic tank, so the well can shut off sometimes instead of having to take care of every drop that's used. Is that clear how that works? Okay, so that's a reservoir of pressure. It's called a pressure maintenance device, that hydrodynamic tank is. But it doesn't hold very much usable water. So we looked also at the possibility of an elevated storage tank, because that would do several things for you. That would allow you to flush the northern system that has the manganese in it and eventually get rid of that. But more importantly, it would reduce the amount of time you've got to run the northern well. So you would much less frequently add manganese-laden water back into the system, because you have this large reservoir of water in the north part and then a well in the south part. So if you had a high sudden demand in the north part, the tank would supply it. If you had a high demand suddenly in the south part, the south well would supply it. So it kind of balances your system out. You put the tank towards the north part and the well to the south part. In the middle of the night, the well would just pump into the tank. When the day starts, you've got water in the tank. The well's still sitting there ready to go, so you've got a supply of water in both places. That's the ultimate, ideal scenario. Recognize these things are costly. So we looked also at the possibility of just installing the well. So what happens there if you just install a well? Well, you can do that. You can run that well off the existing hydrodynamic tank there. It's going to take some control and pump improvements to do that because of the state rules. I won't get into it, but it's much cheaper than an elevated storage tank. So you can do that. If you want to do it in phases, for instance, you could first get the new well, then implement the elevated storage tank, and then circling all the way back around to reduce further the need for the north well to ever run, you could do piping improvements. So that would be the phased approach that we would recommend. I do recommend you increase your water production capacity. That's a well. Your choices are to attempt to rehabilitate the existing well, which I think is probably not going to pay back the value you'd put into it, just based on my experience. You could, well, let me come back to that too. You could install a new well, or you could attempt to connect to another system. I think you'll find it challenging to find somebody else that would, nearby, that would give you the water. You may attempt that, but I think that you may run into some challenges there. If you do rehabilitation on the well, there are a couple different ways you can do. You can do a low-impact kind of rehabilitation, kind of a low-cost effort to get some more capacity out of the well through the screen without installing additional equipment inside, and that'll buy some time. That may give you some more water capacity coming through the well, but what it doesn't do is fix the fact that the metal in the ground has been there 60 years and it has a limited life. Now, I said a lot very fast, all in one sentence, pretty much, so I would expect you to have questions. Please ask me. I'd like to make sure this is clear to you.
First question, well, first, thank you. That was so detailed. I genuinely appreciate all the information. If we were to take that route of rehabilitating a well, how many more years can you estimate that you would get?
Yeah, I hate to not give you an answer, but I can't. I would say if you have a well that's more than 50 years old, its life is limited. I would say 60 years, you're doing good. You can't expect more than 70 from a regular carbon steel well in this water. So, that's the best I can say. Now, it could go tomorrow. It could last 10 more years. I can't tell you.
David, isn't the well on the north side similar in age? Just a couple of years younger, maybe?
I think it is a little bit younger, yes.
Cal, you know? They're close to the same, okay.
Yeah, and that's a good point, but it's not showing decreased capacity right now. So, if you had to replace 2 wells, you had to replace 2 wells, so be it. But you got to start with somewhere, and you got to start with at least one.
When you say the well is ending its service life, I mean, what does that look like? Does it slowly start to decrease in capacity? Does it collapse on itself all one day and we don't have water, or what?
Well, either of those things could happen. The well could slowly reduce capacity and you just not be able to rehabilitate it as sanding gravel, move around and plug the screen, or you could have a failure of the metal in the screen where sand suddenly pours in and you can't stop it, or you could have a failure of the metal above the screen, the part of the well called the casing. And most of you guys know this, so bear with me, but you've got the top of the well, and in your case, it discharges into some pumps. We're just going to pretend like it's a regular well and make it simple. Down the hole, there's a metal pipe called a casing, and it goes through mud and clay and things like that. Then you hit a layer of sand where the good water is. When you get down to the sand layer, there's a screen. So it's a steel tube with a bunch of very fine holes in it. And the water comes in those very fine holes and goes up the casing. When the well becomes old, the metal just has aged. It's rusted. It's near the end of its life. So you can often tell with a camera where there are problems. You can see corrosion, but not always. So I have had a case where had a client have a well failure that there were several places on the well that looked suspect, but no one could tell where the problem was. The casing happened to fail. And when that happens, mud comes in the side of the well. In this case, it did because of the age of the well. And they had to stop production of the well. It's hard to tell how the failure would occur, to answer your question.
So would it be fair to say it would be more problematic than catastrophic in the scenario of the well failing?
If that well failed, you do have one well that could supply your average daily flow. Yeah. So, but you just, at that point, you're down to one well.
We've talked about,
That's right, yeah. It can be multiple corrosion mechanisms, but essentially the water's very soft. It wants to take into it things that can dissolve. Iron is one of those things. Over time, the metal rusts. It's destroyed by the water.
David, we've talked about this a lot, almost every meeting for the last year and a half, and really it was a conversation before then, but it mostly concentrated on the manganese issue. This is something new that we're hearing, and to me, it's kind of alarming. If that well failed, essentially the entire town would be running off of the north well pump. And I'm just going to venture a guess here that the people on the south side of town don't want our water from the north side. The other thing it just really alarmed me about your report when I read that is, if our water system starts to fail, it's a quality of life issue, it's a property value issue.
Yeah.
We have restaurants in town. Most of the restaurants are on the side that doesn't have the manganese problem right now. Well, if they start getting brown water, it's hard to operate a restaurant like that.
Sure.
And if the restaurants can't operate, then our tax revenue goes down. Our tax revenue goes down, we can't pay for those 2 police officers or any others in the town. It's just an alarming situation to me that really has me thinking we've got to reassess what our priorities are in the town in order to protect the town.
Yeah, I don't want to be alarming, so that's not my objective. I'm not here to scare you into doing something. I just want to be just kind of clear-eyed about the issue. The councilwoman asked me a few minutes ago how long the well will last. I can't tell you. It may last a lot longer, but the prudent thing to do, in my opinion, at this point, is to begin to prepare to get rid of that well. Now, one of the advantages of doing it, or taking action on it right now, is there's potential grant money, and I'll ask Bea to speak to that in a minute, but there's potential grant money available to help you do that, because the system has produced a grant program called the Emerging Contaminants Rule, and the state will and has funded new wells to replace wells that have manganese in them. And that is a good shot, I think, to get funding for the well. And then I'm not 100% sure. Bea would have to speak to this, but the tank will also assist you in reducing manganese in your system because it will eliminate the amount of time you've got to run the north well. If you don't have a storage tank, you probably have to run the north well more. So I don't know, Bea, does that you think that works in the area? Yeah. So the tank in the north area would reduce to almost nothing the times you got to run the north well. So those would be a really, really, really good shot at getting that emerging contaminants rule money.
But you said it's an emerging contaminant grant.
Right.
So we wouldn't take out the north well with the manganese.
That's right.
It would just put a new well to supply the water, and that would only be emergency.
That's correct. That's right. It would just be an emergency well. It would count towards your firm capacity. So it would be available. You'd have to test it all the time. You'd have to operate it regularly and make sure it works. You'd have to keep the electronics out and make sure it acts like a normal well in your system for it to really count as your capacity. But you'd want to minimize its use to keep the manganese out of your system. Now, that well is old too. So one day, thought's got to be put into doing something about it. I wish there was a really good way of predicting the age of when a well's going to fail. It's really tough to do. People can invest a good amount of effort in an investigation, but it's hard to predict.
But by doing that stuff, it would probably prolong the life.
Yeah, that's true, because you're not sucking water through the casing.
David, we've also been told that there's a waiting list to get a well drilled. And so maybe a year or more. There are limited vendors who do that sort of thing. What's the waiting list look like in terms of, and how long would it take, you guess, to get through the waiting list and then to get through the work to where the new well goes into service?
I'm glad you asked that question. I meant to bring that point up earlier when I said the prudent thing to do is to start it now, and that's one of the reasons. It's at least a year wait now, and that goes up and down with the market a little bit, but probably a year. And then once you pull the trigger, it could take a year to put the well in and have it in service.
And in terms of cost of a well, it's been suggested that maybe it's $3 million, this type of well?
That's not an unreasonable guess.
I want to ask you a couple of questions about the tank, too, the elevated storage tank. So in your report, you mentioned the option of a 200,000-gallon tank versus a 300,000-gallon tank, and there's a cost issue there. What's the difference in the cost?
Oh, do you happen to have those cost estimate numbers for the 2 versus the 300,000? You just have the which one? Okay. Yes, it's not a linear relationship, so it's not 1.5 times more, but it's substantially more.
So the 200,000-gallon tank is about $3 million, 3.1. And I kind of struggle a little bit with your numbers in the report. Does that just bring us to where we would need to cover our existing use, or does that add a little bit of additional capacity?
It doesn't have much, well, it doesn't have much additional capacity in terms of the way we would recommend sizing a tank. The tank has to be sized to cover your average day use. So let me look that up. I don't have the number on the top of my head here. But to answer your question, no, it doesn't give you any buffer. Yeah, so that is, the number is sized for your average day use, and that actually translates to a 260,000-gallon tank. And there are a couple of reasons in the report that you can actually get by with the 200. So
That brings up another question.
what's that? With the existing ground storage tank is one, and then there's an exception in the rule that you kind of have to negotiate with the regulars, but it's.
So that brings up another question, because I think it was on maybe page 4 of your report, you mentioned that the state may have a problem with us using that 65,000-gallon existing storage tank.
It's a possibility. They may not like that because of the age of the tank. It's in use now, and they haven't complained about it. But when we go to do something else, they may say, why are you doing this? We may have to prove it's okay.
So, how do we answer that question before we spend much money?
Well, we submit a permit application, and if they approve it, then that's acceptance of the use of it.
Right.
What's the cost of a new tank?
Ground storage tank. Yeah, that's a hard one to answer, but ground storage tanks aren't that expensive. I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. I'm going to we're closer to 100,000 than $1 million.
Also, it would require more power, wouldn't it?
Maybe. We would size the well to pump or to allow the water into that tank, given the extra head required. We'd make the tank big and flat, so you didn't need more energy to drive water out of the well, and then pump from there with the service pumps. So probably not. I think if we were careful, we could get that designed so that it works.
So if a permit is applied for, to give the answer to whether we can reuse the existing tank, how long is that permit good for? Because it's being exploratory, right? And we figure out, yeah, if we can reuse it, or no, we can't. What will be the timeline of that permit? If we have no time on that permit.
I can't remember if it's good for 1 year or 2, but you can generally renew it. It's postpone it and say, hey, we're still working on the financing.
Is there an issue, our pipe system's about as old as the wells.
Mhm.
Most of it is the asbestos cement pipe.
Yes.
And, we talked about that. You and I met with Keith was there, the mayor, and Kyle and I all met with you. Kyle had pulled some samples of the pipe, you looked at them, you thought that they looked like they were in decent shape.
That's correct, yeah.
A limited sample, but is there any danger with the elevated water tank of increasing, or even with the pump, of increasing the pressure on those old pipes?
That is a great question. No is the answer. The pressure is going to operate the same way. The pressure's not going to change. Now, there's this minor asterisk there. Different areas may see slightly different pressures. So some pipes may experience things they haven't before, but it's most likely there'll be no noticeable effect. I can't say you won't have one pipe that's old and tired somewhere that says, oh no, I give up the ghost here. But chances are it's going to act just like it did.
So there's something else that I found very interesting in your report, and you said you kind of added it in because really it was out of your own responsibility, and that was the fire protection. And so 2 weeks ago at our meeting, we had the fire department here. We were honoring them with a proclamation from the town for increasing our fire rating. And then I got, your table here, which shows National Fire Protection color coding recommendations. Goes from blue to red, orange and red being the bottom.
Right.
Orange is marginally adequate for firefighting needs. Red is inadequate.
Right.
And then I looked at the map of the existing conditions,
Right.
and we're all orange or red.
Well, and we debated whether to use that table or not. But the reason, because we were trying to compare existing conditions to what would be if we changed things up. So we're not really assessing your firefighting conditions now because your system's highly rated. We're just using that because it's an accepted metric, an accepted framework. So all we're doing is comparing what is to what would be. And we wanted to check and see, are we going to reduce firefighting in some capacities that it's currently in one category and move a bunch of places to a different category? We just don't want to do that. We want to check that. So that we wanted to use some standard to compare that against, and we just chose that table. So we're not saying your fire system's not good. It obviously is. You're very highly rated, and your firefighters do an amazing job. So with the infrastructure they have.
But right now, it's showing that 83% of the town is in the marginal category for firefighting, and 17% is inadequate.
No, that's if the town has a commitment to those numbers, right? If you adopt something that says, hey, this is what our standard's going to be, and you don't, we're just using that as a framework from someone from the outside, something we're not making up. We're just saying, hey, here's a comparison, this versus that. Because the reason we used it is if we move the pressure a PSI or two, that's within the margin of error of the model. So it's a hard rabbit to chase and say, oh, this is a problem now, and it wasn't a problem then. But if we put them into baskets that are recognized, then it's easier to say this is an actual change versus not. So we just use an accepted standard for that, and we're not commenting on the adequacy of your fire system at all.
All right, well, so just for people who are hearing this, maybe here in this room or watching it online, if we implemented all of your recommendations, which would be in the phased approach, the new well, which it seems like we really have to have, the storage tank, and then the increased capacity of the line along Johnson Street, about 5,000 feet of pipe there, water main. It would move some of the parts of town from that orange or red up to a green or a blue.
Yeah, it would have that effect, yeah.
There's another section in your report that addressed a special section just for the splash pad. So there were some of us in town when that splash pad, first of all, everybody loves a splash pad.
We heard the same thing, and that's why we included it.
But, there were some of us in town that kind of questioned the wisdom of building a splash pad on an aging water system, when maybe a higher priority is addressing the water system first. In that section, you estimated that the 500,000 gallons a month, and that it increases the needed capacity of the well that's losing capacity by roughly 20%. So, I mean, I just point that out because as we're making decisions as a town,
Yep.
it seems like we have to take into account all of these things in order to make the best decision for the town.
Well, that is true. I'm glad you pointed out. If the well began to decrease capacity, one obvious step you could do is reduce the use of the splash pad, and that brings your, average daily use down, and then you're back within the capacity of the well. But that doesn't change the fact that the well's old, and the fact that it's losing capacity means you do need a well. So you're right, and those are good mitigation steps. Should you see the well begin to increase its rate of decline, and it's good you're observing that and make that point at this time, so it doesn't shock people if that should occur. But it's just one step on the way.
So from what I read in your report, if we got the new well into place, we could run the entire town off of that well with our existing pipes, without the elevated storage tank.
Right.
And the only time we would have to use water from the well that's been causing the issue with manganese is if there was a fire that needed to be addressed, or if we were doing maintenance on some component of the system that had to be taken down.
That's right. There are a few other things that need to be done if you approach it that way for control of those systems. But yeah, that's essentially it.
Another big important thing. The first page says it is likely that a new well near the existing south well will produce high-quality water with little or no manganese.
Right.
All right, so to me, that's like the big risk for us.
100%, yeah.
Yeah, that maybe we still get the manganese after we do the well, although you're telling us, and I believe you 100%, we need to get started. The prudent approach, as you said, is on that new well, but at least there we would have the space to treat that water, which we don't have on the north side, right?
Yes, you've hit two things that are important to talk about. It doesn't take moving very far to necessarily be out of a zone of good water. So putting the new well close to a place where you know good water increases the likelihood that you're going to hit good water. If you don't, then you're right, you can treat it. And that is the problem. We looked at that, treating the water, excuse me, at the north well to remove the manganese. There are some tricks to that. The biggest one of which at that site is space. It would be very, very difficult to the point of being, I think, impractical to try to put a treatment plant there. So if you have available space and you drill a well and you come up with high manganese, then you could treat the water on site and manage it.
Treat the water.
Yeah, it's a process called catalytic oxidation, commonly known as green sand filtration. It's manganese removal by running it through a filter that has a specially treated media in it that grabs the manganese out of the water and sticks it to the filter media. Then you backwash the filter occasionally and knock all the manganese loose. And you have to manage those what are called residuals. That's a whole other thing, which is why you don't want to treat it if you don't have to.
What do you do?
Yeah, you have several options. You can either take it to your wastewater plant, or you can thicken it on site, either in a pond or mechanically, if you can't take it to your wastewater plant. And once it's thickened, you have to dispose of the very thick sludge through a landfill. It's not hazardous, yeah.
Your recommendation on the elevated water tank, it says tank mixing is recommended. Could you just describe what that is?
Right, sure. You disinfect your water with chlorine, and new water that comes into the tank is going to have a higher amount of that disinfectant in it. Older water is going to have less. As in some parts of the year, the water in the tank is going to want to stratify. So warmer water is going to sit on top, cooler water is going to stay on the bottom, and it's just going to ride up and down like an elevator. So the water without much disinfectant in it is going to get less disinfectant and less disinfectant over time. So the strategy to avoid that from happening is you mix the water so it always has a constant amount of disinfectant in it.
When these wells fail, is any of it because it just runs out of water there in that spot?
I think that's very unlikely in the aquifers you're tapped into. It's generally not that problem. Usually you move a contaminant from someplace to another. When I say contaminant, I mean something like manganese or salt water. Or you end up having a shift in the gravel that's around your well, and it reduces the capacity. This is a very prolific aquifer.
Well, let me just ask you this question then, because we have a water bottling plant, commercial, right north of town on 1077, plus another one, I don't know, maybe 15 miles from here in Robert. It's even bigger, I believe. Does that affect in any way or our aquifer that we're drawing water from?
Well, I don't know if you guys have been following the water war politics in Baton Rouge recently. Okay, I suspected that. But the answer is yes, but not enough to notice. There's so much pressure in that aquifer that if you poked a hole into it, it would come out of the ground on its own pressure. So I'm not a hydrogeologist, but before we do get a permit for a new well, we go to the state and say, hey, we plan to put a well here, is that okay? Now, the aquifer is so prolific, the answer is going to be yes. You can put a well here.
So, $3 million for the well, $3.1 million for the elevated water tank, and then 5,000 feet of pipe to avoid turning on the north well in a fire.
Right.
BIA has told us before the pipe costs about $204 a foot, so another $1 million for that? So roughly $7 million altogether with the phased approach that you have here.
Right.
All right,
And that's
let
if
me
we get the loan.
let me ask that question though, because my understanding is that the only reason we would need the water meters is if we tap into the ladder court money.
It's not the LRWA, the SRF through the Department of Health. So the manganese emergency contaminants grant that David talked about. So that grant opportunity, if you use that low interest loan opportunity, that's a requirement of that grant agency.
If we funded it all ourselves if we had to, or if we got approval from the state for the capital outlay, that would not require us to put the meters in.
Right, the meter is just a requirement from the SRF loan.
Okay. And the meters themselves, I think we have 500 customers roughly. And some of them are already metered because they're businesses. But what does it cost for each meter? I'm trying to calculate what the additional cost is.
It was $650 for the meters, $650,000.
$50,000. So roughly, I don't know, $1,500 per meter?
Mm-hmm. It was, yeah, and it was, yeah. So it would be a contractor that would do that. But that component would just be required with the SRF loan.
Yeah, I'm sorry, you're walking away. So that, we've heard the word loan and we've heard the word grant. What is the grant money?
Okay, so that SRF program, so they have a 49% principal forgiveness, so the only way for them to do a grant is by calling it a principal forgiveness. So you still go through the process of doing the loan, but they just basically forgive 49%. So that one is one of the categories that we would try to get, so you could get 49% forgiven, or the 100% forgiveness if we qualify based on all the things with the manganese. So there's a possibility you would go through the process, you would submit the loan application, and they would forgive 100% of the note. So then on top of that, the LIDACOR, which is a separate thing, that they would provide up to $1 million towards the project. So if you fell into the only 49% forgiveness pot, you still could get $1 million towards it. from Lidacorp.
So the 100% forgiveness grant, is that just for the well?
That's what David was talking about, is that our argument is going to be that because the elevated water tank and the meters, because it's the whole thing is part of resolving that issue.
Right, so it's not, we can apply for it all.
Right, it's just we don't know what the answer from them is going to be until they review the application. So it could be 49%, or it could be 100% forgiven, and then regardless of whichever option they would accept, then you'd still have the $1 million from Lidacorp.
And that would not require metering.
Correct. Because they're just helping supplement, so the Lidacorp program is just supplying match. So they're just trying to fill the gap of what the entity's having to come up with. So they're just helping with what they're calling a match.
So, am I understanding this correctly, that if we were to be approved for 100% forgiveness, we essentially wouldn't pay for any of this? Is that,
Yes.
okay? That
But
sounds insane, but
we
yeah,
just can't guarantee it.
right. But as long as we're approved for the loan, we would at least get 49%?
That's the highest probability. The 100% is a lower probability. It's somewhat competitive and is somewhat, so they get applications from a lot of people. So they rate you, and so it just kind of all depends on all the applications that they get and how they're able to distribute that principal forgiveness pot that they're able to give out.
So somebody has more needs, older wells, more contaminants.
It just all depends on who's all applying at the same time that we would be.
Whenever we put out the application, it's huge, that's all. Every time got an example of the stuff they ask you, right? Isn't that what we got in the last packet?
When do we find out? Because we already,
So
Voted on that.
when we apply, then we would receive an answer back from LDH.
when does,
So Lidacorp, but in order to take advantage of the $1 million from Lidacorp, that's who has been coordinating with LDH. And so we know for sure that the Lidacorp match has been submitted. We are waiting for Lidacorp to tell us if they have submitted the LDH application.
another thing that's in David's report is the positioning of the elevated water tank. Looks like it's right across the street from Tim's house. And it's right on Johnson Street. Just to ask you, does it have to be, could it be hidden in the woods behind there, or does it need to be in that exact spot?
It could be hidden in the woods behind there. We just picked that spot. We just kind of looked at the hydraulic model and said, this area would be a great spot for the well, given what you got. Excuse me, for the tank, given what you got.
This may be a question for Bia, sorry. I know y'all are just going to play musical chairs.
That'll be great.
If we go this route and we install meters, do we have any estimate of what it would cost residents if we're metering water? What kind of increase they would see in their water bill?
So we did not do a rate study. That's doable. I want to say you guys have done an LRWA rate study before.
Yeah, we have a request.
Yeah.
Put into them right now.
Yeah.
It's been 5 years since we've done it, and the last time we met with them, we requested one this year. Yeah.
I mean, look, I'm a resident too, and I've always said you can pry my flat rate water from my cold dead hands because it's great, right? And a lot of people feel that way, and it's going to be hard to convince them. But then hearing that we could potentially get all of our water woes fixed for possibly free is a big deal, right?
Not
So,
without meters.
but not without meters.
Right, to use this program, you'd need the meters.
Thank you.
The water meter route is coming regardless of every time DHA comes here or there's something.
Every time DHH comes here, they can't believe we're not metered. The water sector grant, we lucked out and didn't have to put meters in for that, and we got a little money. So that route is coming.
So you've essentially been told by the state at some point
At
we're
some
going to be
point,
required to have
We're going to
meters.
have to. because we did the lead service inventory last year. Now the meter route is going to be soon.
One way or another.
The businesses, they have a flat rate for the water usage, and if you go above that, they start to pay?
Yeah, they pay like a base, the first 50,000 gallons is so much money, then they pay so much after.
Okay, so we could set a similar design up for the residential meters. All right. Could you do us a favor and give us some data on how many businesses are going above that 50,000 threshold, just to give us an idea of, and how much they're paying?
It's going to be your restaurants and Route 22 as a fountain machine. Besides, like your bank and your other places that are metered, they don't touch the minimum.
And that's something else that I asked David via email, was just looking, ahead. We have limited space in town for development, but we do have some space, especially a lot going out on Highway 22. I'd ask you if you've got some calculations for what types of businesses use more water, how much they use, so that we could, in effect, use that in our planning when somebody comes in and wants to open a business in town.
Yeah, there are such tables available, and I'm sorry I hadn't gotten it to you. We're just doing our year-end closeout for grants, and we've been slammed, but I could get you something like that.
How does it work that, and you had said that we have to bring in 100% plus,
15%.
no, 100% plus the cost of running the water system?
Yes, 1.15 is that's the sustainability
Right,
factor.
sustainability to be able to keep it open. And that's why we asked for a study. It may go up. We're finding out. How does all this money affect that? Or does it? Does it go into that paying it back?
I would think if you got a loan, the note payment would be built into
Correct.
that,
That's what I was.
into your water, into your
Yeah, because that 15% is just to help.
contingency, right?
Yeah, it's just to help keep a contingency for repairs.
Unexpected
Yeah.
things.
to
So if that loan payment, that yearly loan payment goes up X amount of dollars, that when you get on meters, that's gonna affect every single person, correct? Because of that loan payment being put into the cost of running your water system.
Now, let's say the loan payment's $200,000 a year, that's gonna be split up. That's gonna be put in your water budget.
By 500 or whatever the number of
That percentage.
businesses. Yeah,
We need to know that too. Is there some information that you can get, Kyle, that goes into what's in this rate study? Because $200,000 would be a lot of money on everybody's bill every month.
What is our budget for water now?
Push it in here.
Yeah, it's gonna be that plus, we'll do a rate study in the next few months, and we can compare it to what it was 4 years ago, and then play with some numbers.
Is 200,000 our payment rate?
I think that was one of the,
That was,
it all depends on, I think y'all had said y'all put up $1 million, and then it depends on how much forgiveness we
right,
get.
so if y'all put up at just the 49% forgiveness, and y'all putting up an extra $1 million, and Lidacor putting up the $1 million, the note would be $255, $378 a year. That was the estimate that Lidacor
Right,
provided.
and that's the best odds we have to get,
Yeah,
not the 49%, right?
Yeah, so that would break down to, we have 500 customers, about $42 a month per customer.
Yeah, with some rate difference because of businesses.
Right, of course, right, this is on average, right, Thank you guys so much.
Yeah. More questions, Dave? Sure. You've been, you said 30 years you've been doing this? Yes. Wow, that's impressive, thank you. In those years, I'm sure you've seen a lot of systems. How many pipes have you seen experience catastrophic failure?
A lot.
No, I'm in the elevator business, so I kind of comprehend what you're talking about here. I was curious to get your response.
Yeah, so I wanted to make this point earlier. I've not seen, for instance, an inspection of your well that's had reduced capacity. So I'm strictly speaking in broad strokes of terms of well life. And I don't want anybody to panic and say, oh, no, we got to fix it tomorrow. I'm just telling you from experience. Pipe is the same way. I did see one sample of your AC pipe. It looked very good. It was not soft. There was no interior surface delamination. It looked good. So how long is that pipe going to last? I can't say.
But you've not seen any instance where it's in bad shape.
I have seen exactly one sample, unfortunately, of your system, and it looked good. That one sample of your system looked really
So we know
solid.
that section of pipe is pretty good, but 3 feet down the line, it may be bad. We don't know what the electrolysis is taking place.
Unfortunately, yeah, but we don't know. Yeah.
Back to the splash pad, this is, I'm all out of order here, so I'm just jotting things down, so bear with me. About the splash pad, is it a deterrent to our current system? Is it something we need to consider minimizing?
No,
Is that what you're
you've
telling
got the
me?
capacity for that, no problem.
So there's no issues running it right now?
Not that I know of. Are you experiencing any operational issues from it? Yeah, it looks fine. Are you within your capacity?
All right, so we know the current capacity of that well. Do we know what it was when the splash pad was installed? That's probably a common question, huh?
Yeah, we do.
I guess what I'm trying to get to, so we have year-over-year flow rate on that well, the south well I'm talking about. We know what its capacity has been operating at for how many years. And when we look at that chart, have we seen an abnormal decrease in it since the splash pad was put in place? Right, 'cause it's alarming when you read this. It depends on how you take this report. It's like, holy smokes, we need to shut this thing off now, right? So we have
Not
not
my
seen.
intent to alarm anybody. I'm just trying to.
Well, I get it, but that's why we want to clear these things up.
Sure, I'm glad you are. Thank you.
All right, so we're able to see the bell curve that we're on right now as far as the change in the negative flow rate over a history of time. We haven't seen anything that indicates a significant change at any point in time. Is that correct? It's just a gradual, okay.
The splash pad, that issue, there's another fix to it, and that's to recycle the water. Now, that's a complicated thing to do, because you got to treat the water, you have to, I think, put ultraviolet light on it now as a state requirement. But that is a possibility, too.
Well, I mean, it's things we have to look at. If we start, as you said, if we start seeing all of a sudden a surge in negative flow rate, this is what I'm understanding.
That's
As of right now, we don't think there's a negative impact to our system because of the splash pad.
Yeah, you've got it. Right, that's what I can communicate.
I'm looking at the budget for the water, also, the Waterworks Fund. It's $280,000 in revenue. If you take out the $6 million grant that we don't know if we're going to get or not, but $280,000 in revenue and $350,000 right now in operating expenses for this year's budget, with a negative 70.
And then back to the well. With this aquifer that we tapped in, and with your history, I'm assuming you're pretty familiar with the aquifer in this area. We're looking at moving maybe, 200 feet to get to where the new well site would be. And there's no way you can answer this question. I'm just simply asking for a wild guess, right? What are the odds of us maintaining quality water, or what are the odds of us not maintaining? What would be your prediction? It's only a guess.
First thing I would do is get with a hydrogeologist and pick the smallest distance we can practically move. And then I would put the well there, and the closer we are to the existing source of water, the lower the chances. I think the chances are good you're going to get good water. And that's the best I can say, just based on experience.
My understanding, I'm not a water person by no means, so don't think I'm trying to pretend to be one. You can move 10 feet and ruin your whole.
10 feet is probably, you're going to be okay, because the water that's coming to the current well is coming from sand all around it.
You just answered my question because you hesitated, right? So there's no way of predicting it. So let me ask this question then. Is there a way of doing some kind of a test?
Yes, and in fact, we would
To see
recommend.
do we pop the right water?
That's
And
exactly
so
right.
we're in the right
Yeah.
spot.
Yeah.
And what's something like that cost?
Yeah, that is very difficult. Yeah, very difficult to say, because that test well number comes back different a lot. But what did you budget for it? Okay, I was going to say 250. So,
Right, so far less than 3 million.
yeah, but, that number is variable, so I don't want to promise those numbers.
I understand. Yeah, this is just
I've gotten burned by that a couple of times. I've thrown out a number and not
helping any of this. We're just trying to get some ideas. So we know if we invest in this, we're not guaranteed to go 3 million in the hole.
That's right. So
We would probably shoot a test well.
if you put a test hole in and take a water sample, test well, and take a water sample, you will have an idea at that point, your water quality.
So I've had several people ask me this. We keep getting told that there's only so many people in the country that do this type of drilling. Is that?
Yeah, it is, and particularly in this region. So there are a lot of well drillers in Louisiana, but most places, they don't have to drill very deep. There are only 2 currently that I know of, well drillers in Louisiana, that have the expertise, the equipment, and the capacity to drill your well. We have tried to entice well drillers from other states to come to do work here, and have not succeeded. Yes, I thought the same thing. But that's just the nature of the market right now.
I've got one thing I'd like to go back to while we're at it, and it was your numbers on the fire flow existing capacity. And this is for everybody watching at home and everybody in here tonight. Yes, we just had a fire rating of number 1. The number 1 category is water source availability. I see a lot of red dots here on the north side, but what people don't understand is we have the Chifonta River, we have swimming pools. We can draft out of the river, put it into a portable holding tank, draft out of that into the pumper and put it on the fire. So that all is one of the characteristics that they take into recommendation on that list.
I'm glad you made that point, yeah.
We're very good at that. So I don't want anybody worried that in case there's a house fire on the north side, there'll be no water. There's plenty of water.
Yeah, well, like I said, we needed some kind of pre-existing set of baskets to use, because we didn't want to make one up, so we used that.
Sorry. Back to the fire thing. Frank raises a question. Is it going, like I see this section on the map, the color changes, is that just changing with the elevated tank, or is that also including the new 8-inch lines, or whatever the larger lines?
Well, I'd have to go back through the exhibits one by one. I don't remember them offhand, but conceptually, if there's no 8-inch line, there are a few spots in the northwest part of the town that have a reduced capacity. And that can be taken care of by temporarily running the north well.
On the existing pipe?
Correct, on the existing pipe.
Okay, so we can see increased fire protection and don't have to get to phase 3.
Right. But you will be putting manganese in your.
Yeah, I understand that.
David, how does that look? Let's say there's a house fire at 3 a.m.
Yep.
How do you get that pump on?
Well, I mentioned just briefly, we're going to have some controls changes, and there are going to be some things that we're going to have to set that up so that you can either call it by SCADA, or you, under a certain reduced pressure, the well calls itself locally. So that it's some electronic control magic.
Yeah, the question Tim was asking, because we've had, I guess, a concern here that if we drilled a new well, we'd get dirty water. And that's a risk, but to me, that risk is off the table, because we know we need a new well.
Yeah.
And we know that if we got in line for a new well tomorrow, it would be 2 years before we got that new well.
Right.
And if we continue to say, well, we're going to push this off down the road,
Right.
we're rolling the dice with the whole water system, basically.
Yeah, and as I mentioned, I think I mentioned this, if I didn't, forgive me, but now is a great time because the grant money is available. This is necessary, but it's really a separate question from the manganese. The grant money from the manganese is there, and the place to drill it happens to be next to your new well, which happens to be getting smaller. So if you had a well that was a full-size well right there, that would be a different question. But because that well is small and the capacity is reducing, and you know the water's good there, that's a good way to solve your manganese problem and your old well problem with one shot.
We were talking about a year before we get started, a year to finish it. But we're talking 3 phases. We're talking a well, piping, and elevated tank.
Right, so the 2 years is just phase one.
Just phase
It's
one.
just getting the well bid out.
Unless,
Here and installed.
right, unless the grant came back 100% funding all of it, then you could start all 3 of those things at the same time.
I also want to say, if we had started this
The
two,
longest lead time is the well. So you could concurrently do the other 2 phases if it's just the one thing that takes the longest is the well because of the availability of the contractor. So you could concurrently do, it's not like a compounding effect that it would take 2 years and then more, you could be doing the other things at the same time.
Right, the tower can be built simultaneously.
Correct.
Or you actually ahead of time.
Correct.
Is the forgiveness a sliding scale, or is it just one or the other, 49 or 100?
It's just that, yeah. You either qualify for that pot or either one of those.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, I don't have the original Owen & White report that showed they inventoried the pipes. Do we have an existing 8-inch line along Johnson Street, or is that smaller?
So you said, Kyle, that we have cambered that pipe? We have inspected it to see if there's any obvious spots that are coming up on the
Case
south?
yes. We haven't got an official report back from Griner, who did it. One of his employees said that they didn't see anything major, but they don't see a remedy besides just aging well.
I think the lesson we've learned here is where we started with the same conversation 3 years ago now. And here we are, and we're $3 million higher. So if we continue to just kick the can down the road, future prices are going to just keep going up. Is that an accurate statement, David, you believe?
In my opinion, yes. You may see some temporary rate of price increase change because of we're kind of ending a big phase of federal grants. But the last time this happened, I didn't see a price decrease that stuck for any time at all. So yes, unfortunately, this is probably, and tomorrow is the same way, the best price you'll get, and the next day is the best price you'll get.
Thank you.
So, kind of piecing all of what you're saying together, looking at our situation, let's live in a hypothetical world. The north well is as good as the south well. We have no manganese or brown water, whatever. What are your recommendations to the town?
Let me make sure I understand your question, I'm sorry. If the north well and the south well are the same age, and the north well has no manganese and the south well has no manganese, and the south well...
Looking at our infrastructure, basically,
Yeah.
if we had 2 perfect wells right now, throwing perfect, this all came up because we're starting to see more and more brown water, it seems like.
If you had 2 60-year-old wells, I would recommend to you, your hydraulics are good, and you've got whoever plans your piping system, good for them. But I would also start saving money for a well, regardless, and do the best you can to implement one, because at that age, it's difficult to predict when it's going to go out.
That's what I was trying to get out of it.
Yeah. And the problem, obviously, you guys manage public money, so I'm not saying anything that's going to surprise you, but if it were to fail, then you would have a real problem on your hands if you didn't plan ahead, because all of a sudden, you got to do something fast, and that's usually not the most cost-effective way to operate.
Yeah, we have a backup source. It's coming out of Black River Estates, that area? Okay, so is there enough water, just hypothetically, if we had to take our water from that source, do they have enough water to supply the tank? and we'd have to pay them for it.
And it's quite expensive, isn't it, Kyle?
So I said earlier, I'd be surprised if you can get one. If you've got one, good for you. You'll do good.
We do. Okay, John, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. So John Brewster, 105 Rampart Street. So a couple of things I heard. It seems like there's quite a bit of worry about the south well and its potential of failing. Is that, do you have that same level of concern that you're afraid it's going to fail? And the reason I'm asking is because I talked to several people, but I want to hear, you have a level of concern that it's going to fail?
Well, my concern is the well is reaching what I would normally expect for a well of that type, and it's going to reaches end of life. So you have two wells that are old, and I think it's very prudent to do everything you can to start to replace your wells, to recapitalize. You're going to need one and another one soon. So I'm not concerned with imminent failure. It was cambered. You don't have the official report. I think the verbal report is they didn't see a place where it's imminently failing, so that's very encouraging. But they did observe as well that it's an older well. So the prudent thing is, because of the age of the well, is to find a way to replace it.
Right. Well, aren't there tests that we can run? So you're concerned about the casing thickness?
The casing and the screen.
So the casing thickness, we should be able to test that, right? We can test that. I believe we can test that.
You can.
Okay. And from what I understand, in talking to several of the drilling contractors, they go down and they look at it with the camera, right? And I asked them several questions. So typically, the wells back in that age were drilled with Schedule 80 carbon steel pipe, and typically a stainless steel louver type screen is what I've been told. Is that correct, Kyle? Are you not certain on the carbon steel thickness? So when I asked them several questions, since we have an artesian well, right, we don't have introduction of oxygen into the well to cause oxidation and rust formation, since it's an artesian well. So that, from what I understand when I started asking them questions, that is a very positive thing. So we have oxygen intrusion. So the chances of us having a corroded carbon steel from oxidation is very slim to none. The only other possibility, from what I was talking to them, is the possibility of maybe erosion from sand or sediments and those types of things. But if we bring a camera down and we don't see the sand, right, so you probably saw some scale buildup, and that's why I gave all of you guys the information about reclaiming the well. Where they go down, they actually brush the screens, they can do an acid wash and then a high bleach concentration to kill any type of germicide, right?
Would you address the question to the gentleman?
So my question is, I mean, from what I'm hearing and talking to these folks, that well could last forever since it's artisanally produced. So that's one question, okay, that the only way we could determine that, I guess, is trying to run a test. But everyone I talked to had no concerns about that since it's an artesian well. The chance of oxidation is slim to none. So the other thing is, what size is that well, Kyle? Is it a 6-inch? 4-inch? So, yep.
We were actually worried that we weren't going to be able to screen because of the size.
But you were able to do that.
Weren't they both artesian wells?
Yeah.
Yes, but here's the difference. On the south well, that well flows artisanally into a tank, then we pump it. Right, there's no pulling out of it. So one of the things I would like to see is, what if we were to drop a pump into that well, pump it out, what would be our drawdown rate? I'd love to see a drawdown rate and a max capacity, because we know we have good water there, right? If we could drop a pump in it, now we're going to get a heck of a lot more flow than just it flowing artisanally into a tank and then pumping it. then we know we have good water because that well's always produced good water, so.
Well, one thing I would say about that is conceptually you're right, and I'm impressed you've looked that closely into it. However, when you increase the amount of water that comes out of a well, you change the sand that's gathered around the screen, and you have a very high risk of causing a failure when you do that. And there's a well not too far away from you guys that has happened in that case, so it is a risk.
Yeah, there's a risk in that. There's a risk of drilling a well 10 feet away and we get manganese. So one other question is, what would be the footprint of the screens to eliminate the manganese?
That's a good question.
I mean, it's not very big,
No,
right?
it's not.
So we talk about having the real estate to do so. I don't know how much real estate we have at the well on the north side of town, but we certainly have enough to do an elevated platform and put the screens up above the existing equipment. We certainly have that much ground. So it'd be interesting to see what the footprint of that screen system would be. Mm-hmm. Right.
So it's the dewatering, right, that's the problem.
Okay, so that's more of a problem than the real estate, because I've kept hearing real estate, but I know we could elevate it. Okay, so that makes sense then. So anyway, it'd be interesting to see if you were to model that with a pump to find out what the drawdown rate, and there's a test that we could even do a drawdown rate, right?
Yes, but I would recommend against you.
Those suggestions could be submitted, and then we can look at that to be done.
Okay, well, I gave you all a bunch of information.
Thank you.
I'm just trying to help out.
Sure.
All right.
Hey, can I follow up on some things he said?
Oh, no, I was just going to say, you see, he has done a lot of looking at it, so it's good you've got interested citizens.
He brought up an interesting point. In my line of business, electrolysis is a disaster for us. And you mentioned earlier that you've seen catastrophic failures. You've seen quite a few. And I use the word electrolysis because that's what impacts my line of business. But he just brought up an artesian well that the possibility of electrolysis taking over is practically zero.
Well, I mean,
So the catastrophic failures that we've seen, is it because there's oxygen been in? He said oxygen is introduced. So our type of well that we have down here, how likely would they have a catastrophic failure? Because listen to what he just said, it sounds like it's almost zero. We're just waiting on the thing to die is our biggest risk.
Yeah, so I misunderstood your question earlier, I'm sorry. I thought you meant pipes in the ground, catastrophic failure, as opposed to well casing pipe. I've seen fewer well casing pipes fail than pipes in the ground, just to clarify that. All I can tell you is, by experience, at that age, something's going to get that well soon. He's right in the fact that if the water stays at the filling the casing, it's not going to rust. But there are other things that are going to get it. The screen can mess up. As you said, erosion from sand can take it. It's just a risk having that infrastructure in the ground.
Okay, because I was taking a conversation earlier that we're staring down the barrel of a failure.
No, and I'm glad you clarified, because I really don't want to leave you with a sense of, oh no, this is doom. That's not the case. I think it's the point, if I left your thinking regarding that well, is it's prudent to find a way to get a new one at this point. That would be my recommendation to you.
He mentioned also if there's a way of going down and testing that pipe.
There are,
You agree, but it seemed you were reluctant to agree to that. Can
Yeah,
y'all expand upon that for me?
Yeah, it's worth doing to do a metallurgical, an analysis of the pipe with instruments they can put down and see. But what I don't want is for you to have a false sense of security. Oh, the casing's okay, well, this well's fine, and it may not be. Something else may get you with the well. Like I said, I feel like Chicken Little, and that's exactly the place I don't want to be. I just want to say, if the capacity of that well is decreasing, something's not right with it. Whether the capacity gets you or you have a failure that's mechanical or structural, a well of that age is suspect for giving you much more service life. Cal mentioned that they cambered the well, and just after cammering, they knocked some stuff off the inside of the well and got a brief burst of increased capacity, but the capacity loss returned. Well, it's difficult to figure out, just from that little bit of information what's going on. But if the capacity loss returns, that just kind of goes to my point that it is a concern if it's having reduced capacity. If it keeps growing with reduced capacity, you'll eventually have not enough capacity.
So it sounds like we're more of a risk. I mean, this thing is slowly decreasing or dying, whatever you want to say. That's more of a risk than a catastrophe.
But that's right, yeah. So he's doing the right thing in keeping an eye on it year by year, and hasn't noticed a great jump. And that's why I'm saying, hey, look, the prudent thing to do is to get ready, because you don't want to have it fail without a plan. And this grant is a super good opportunity to do that. I'm got a high degree of hope that the grant comes through for you, and certainly the 100%. But even if it doesn't, it's something you really need to think about, saying we need to figure out how we're going to manage this. Yes, sir.
David, in your experience over 30 years, have you seen many wells go 80 to 100 years old?
No. Not many. Not many.
You brought up a good point a minute ago. I forgot about that, Kyle, but when you ran the camera down, you saw increased capacity. So on the reclaiming of the well, one of the things that they do, they take mechanical brushes and they go down and they brush these screens. And if we saw increased capacity just by running the camera down, that to me seems very logical that that may be part of our problem. And we take the mechanical brushes and brush the screens, and we may get all of the capacity back. And these things we can do at minimum.
Concerned about doing that and disrupting.
I'm going to get Reiner to, I'm going to have to be able to reach out to him and give us the report. He didn't recommend or ask for it. He didn't think, from what he saw, he didn't think ask for it.
But the mechanical brushing, did you talk to them about the mechanical brushing? So there's 3 different types of reclaiming.
One of the guys drilled. One of the two.
Okay.
So I'll get the report.
Was that David, did you have concern about that?
I didn't necessarily, but I remember what I said. I said that you can do it and you can get a short-term increase in capacity, but my concern is that the capacity loss will come again. And then
It won't disrupt the well or the screen.
well, here's where I would defer to the well driller, because they have much more experience in the rehabilitation of wells in this particular area. They worked here quite a bit, and I would listen to what they have to say about that.
But you seem to be concerned that the rehabilitation could diminish. I thought you said earlier.
Relining, thank you, yes. So if you reline it, you put a smaller well inside. I'm sorry, I didn't make that clear. I should have explained how that works. And if this is only a 4-inch well, it's just not practical to do. Yeah.
But as far as cleaning it out, you don't have any.
I would defer to the guys who do those techniques, because they've had enough School of Hard Knocks experience that I think they would shoot pretty straight with you.
Let me ask Kyle, when that work was done, it was just recently done by Grana, what, 2 months ago? More than that? 6 months? Okay. So we don't have the report back. When we get the report, will the recommendations be in that report? If there is one, okay, all right. So let's see.
Speaking to the salesman who makes the rounds, he said that they didn't have a recommendation.
Okay, all right. What we're doing tonight and what we've done so far, and then we've got the study, we've got the recommendation that we need a new well. I mean, it's time to start certainly looking at that. I think we're on the right track, and, this isn't a new thing. We've probably had submitted for an elevated tower and a new well probably 4 years ago, if I'm right. So it's not a new thing. It's not a suddenly we're aware that we need a new well. We've known that, and we've tried to get financing for that through capital outlay. It hasn't worked. We're still doing that, and now we have a loan applied for. So we're making the steps, and I think we're going in the right direction. And certainly the report really gives us a plan. It gives us a plan where to drill the well, where to erect the elevated tower at. So we're a lot further along than we've ever been, and certainly you've been very kind to come in and almost an hour and a half you've been answering our questions. And
Well, I'm actually delighted when a public body and the citizens take this much of an interest in an area of infrastructure that's buried beneath the ground. So, geek that I am, I like
we have one other resident that has a question. I want to give her an opportunity.
Drilling out of Laurel, Mississippi is who I've been dealing with. They gave me the most information. I think they even work in Louisiana if you decide to.
Submit that to us.
Maybe it's on the paperwork I gave you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. All right. Shorter. Okay, Stacy Domain, 103 Renee Street. What I want to know, I heard about replacing the pipe on Johnson, and I had talked to Carl about the sidewalk in front of my house.
Is this a question for the gentleman?
Okay, may I give the background first?
I'm
Thank
trying
you.
to keep you to a question.
Thank you, I will do so, and I'm the only one that you argue with mine.
Because I don't want
I'm
you
the
wasting our
only,
time.
no, you don't. But people
That's
have
true.
been up here for 10, 15 minutes and you never said a word.
That's
So
not
stop,
true.
Gene. Anyhow, I've talked to Carl about the sidewalk, but the sidewalk is cracking. But what is noticeable, there is a metal piece with the water, because you've got the gas line, the water line under the sidewalk. Now, the metal piece for the water line is a major crack. So is it more than one place in town that y'all have checked where there is a problem with the water line? Because where my house is, that water and gas line run all the way up Renee Street and on to Cedar, because I'm at the highway, the last street in town. So I want to know is what's going on, is there something causing, because from the oak tree, the registered oak tree, to the highway are major cracks in the sidewalk on my property. So is it the water? And I mean, we've had where something ran over the
To
sidewalk.
answer your
This is
question,
different.
yes. We took samples from 8 different sites. So, yes, to answer your question.
Okay, so it's okay? So- No, it's right there by where the trash cans are, right at the, okay. All right, because you had a water leak over there not that long ago. Okay, I just want to know, because I can see, like I said, all of this sinking, and why is it doing it, and is this the only place in town? Thank you. Have a seat.
You made a comment off mic that I just want everybody, I'm going to repeat it. If we rehab that well, it does nothing to help with the brown water. We're still running because of the capacity.
correct. And
That, since you said it off mic.
I don't remember who was it that mentioned growth, someone did, and that's not covered by this study at all, but I just want to point out, because I mentioned growth, that if you do have growth, then you can run into a capacity problem in the state's eyes, because your system has to be supported at its average day with the largest well out of service. So if you exceed the capacity of your existing small well, then you're going to be out of compliance in that regard, and you're very near it. So just.
Yeah, I guess my thought on that was just that if we replace this well, we know we're going to have to replace the other well somewhere down the line. That's where the growth maybe would come from.
Well, right, but just the point I wanted to make is that you're near the capacity of that smaller well. And if you have growth, you could exceed it. And you can take a first step of shutting down the splash pad or recycling the splash pad water, but that is something to just think about.
And the life of the north well will be prolonged by doing this in the south well, because the usage would be smaller.
So the reason, there's one mechanism that could prolong the life of it, and that is that the sand around the screen is not having force applied to it by the water coming out. So that one thing is potentially longer life. The acting of the water on the steel or any other mechanism is not, it is what it is when the well's in the ground. So, but there's that one thing that'll extend its life. So I don't want to give you false hope there.
So you just talked about exceeding capacity
Right,
of the smallest well.
right.
And that is currently, what's the capacity of it right now?
The capacity right now, I think, is 210.
So where do we, and what are we operating at
Yeah,
right now?
we're making an estimate, but it's one based on communities similar to this of around 180.
That's 210 without a pump on it.
That's correct.
It's RT.
Yep.
What's the average impact of a home on that rate? I mean, if we had an extra 5 homes built,
Yeah. On an average day, 0.3 gallons per minute.
So if I'm doing the math right, if we grew another 15%, then we would be approaching max.
I'd have
Because
to.
we're at 180 versus 210 right now, so basically a quick 30 divided by 210, right? So we're looking right at 15% growth to get max.
Yep.
So we do have in the ordinance right now on the sewer system, we have like a more.
Can I follow up on that comment? Just so it's all together, and then whoever's watching, listening to the notes, that's adding another 75 homes in this town. So I think in your report, or someone mentioned earlier, that I don't think we have that much geography in town, so it's definitely a concern, especially if we continue to see that thing decrease and we were to lose the north, right? So I just wanted to, I like to run the numbers and look at the facts.
It's not, none of that's a point of
That's what I was going to get with this. Our sewer system currently has besides front assessment paid lots, the sewer system is at its capacity. So the houses that aren't built now, that's all that we can take. Say on 22, those areas that are for sale, that's when we have to decide if it's a large user, can we handle it? It might limit to what can be built. But all the lots in town where houses are figured in the number for operating the sewer plant. But it's in the sewer ordinance that there's no addition features that the sewer plant can handle. Correct.
Hey, Kyle, I got a question for you. So if we were to remove the manganese, let's say at the new proposed site, because we don't have the room at the north well, right? Because you said we would have to dispose of the sludge some way. So is the plan to have a retention pond or something to store the sludge, or a landform fill area, or what are you gonna?
Now we're hoping it doesn't have.
No, we're hoping we don't have that.
No, I understand, but that was one of the concerns, right? If we did have it, we would have the ability to do that at the new location.
That's a number that's in none of these figures is how much it costs.
Right. Yeah, that, and how do we do it? Do we truck it out? What are we gonna do with it? Because if we were gonna truck it, we could certainly truck it at the, north well as well. Because we have the footprint to put the filters in, if we were to truck the sludge out.
Well, I'm not 100% sure. The most cost-effective way to deal with the sludge is with a pond, by far. You can mechanically thicken it, but that takes real estate as well, and it's very high maintenance. It's not a fun thing to fool with.
Just a random question, but is there like any odors or anything? Yeah, okay, people are gonna live by this, so I know that's gonna be a question.
Yeah, no, you can have, if you don't manage it carefully, you can have a noticeable odor of a metallic smell or something like that. That was not like sewage treatment. And you can run that through carbon or whatever, if it's in a densely populated area to mitigate any odors. So, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We would also have to get a discharge permit from DEQ.
That is correct, yeah.
What was that? We'd have to get a discharge permit from DEQ if we go that route, and are they gonna give us one or not? That's another.
He mentioned our sewer system, we couldn't do it.
No, it would be a separate one from our sewer system. For the water. Correct.
Would these ponds be considered oxidation ponds? Is that a different scenario?
That's a different scenario. These are just holding ponds. They settle the sludge out. The sludge settles to the bottom of the pond, and then at a certain period, you come in and rake it out with a track hoe and take it away.
Water goes
Yeah.
to the.
How expensive is all that? Because you said you could take it to the landfill, but you gotta pay the landfill. You have to take this stuff out. How expensive is all that?
I don't know those numbers, to be honest, off the top of my head.
Well, it's gonna be,
Yeah.
Cross that bridge when it comes. So this is all if we have manganese after drilling the well, and that's another challenge entirely.
Peter, do you have any additional conversation that we need to cover? David, thank you very much for coming tonight. Oh, I'm sorry. Come up.
Emily Ogle, 100 2nd Street. I just know you've talked about the well having like a lifespan and us kind of getting to the end of that. And I know you spoke about the section of pipe that you looked into was, good overall, decent. Real quick, yeah.
Okay, so I haven't seen the report. I don't know. I'm just saying, in general, the age of wells, the 70-year mark is kind of you're getting up there. So I haven't seen this particular report, and that needs to be looked at closely. I'm just telling you in general.
Gotcha. We know we've kind of talked about our pipe systems in town, the underground pipes being around the same age. What's the lifespan for that? Do you know, or is that something we should be looking into starting to replace, or within the next decade or so?
Different materials have different lifespans. You have, I believe, some AC. I don't know how much your system is cast iron or ductile.
70 AC, 30.
Okay. Okay, so cast iron, it's got lifespan of, in places, 100 years and going. AC, it is difficult to predict, extremely difficult to predict, has to do with the water chemistry and how it was bedded and how well it was installed. That's a hard one to predict. The thing to do is to take occasional samples and study what the pipe actually looks like. If you get online and start looking for the lifespan of AC pipe, you'll see wide ranges. So I would be unwise to tell you that number.
She brings up a good point. So I guess my question is, it's unpredictable. What would be the signs that we should be looking for? I'm going to assume, this is not my area of expertise, that we'll start seeing leaks in spots.
That's a good indicator, but you'll also see some effect on the pipe material itself. And there's a lot of literature about it, about how to do assessment of AC pipe, about the program to set it up if you need to do that. I don't know.
you said some conditions.
What's that?
You said by the condition of the pipe. What is that?
Right. So if the pipe, as you said, if you end up getting a lot of line breaks, well, that's an indication that your pipe is starting to fail. But there's literature published on what to look for in the pipe if you tap it or if you sample it occasionally and say, oh, okay, we've assessed this percentage of the pipes in the system and they're all sound. We don't see any problem. Our breakage rate has remained pretty steady. We don't see a problem. It's always prudent to have, a plan in place to recapitalize your infrastructure. Very difficult to do, I know, because you have to make a pile of money that people want to do something else with. I've seen it many times. Okay, but if otherwise you have to make a plan to get a loan. So you either are like this or like this. That's a political decision, but it is good to pay attention to it and just keep your mind, around the fact that one day it's going to need help. Same with the well. That's the point.
Yeah, so should we, are there industry or norms that we should be following based upon the age of our pipe and the type of pipe do we have, how often we should be doing, is it the coin samples?
That would be.
And then also monitoring the number of breaks, should that be something that we chart and look at?
Yeah, a lot of systems do that. They keep it in their GIS. So, and some of them do it very rigorously with statistical models, and some put pipe break as a meso map, and they step back from the thing and say, oh, we got a lot of breaks in this area, it's a problem. So, different ways to approach it. But that would be its own kind of evaluation. I wouldn't feel comfortable speaking to that just off the cuff.
Do we have?
I could say, if we've ever had a leak on the AC or cast iron pipe, we've had leaks on, more leaks on new polyethylene lines in like a street that comes to mind, Fifth Street, the line we just replaced. That was a steel line from probably 100 years ago. That's the kind of stuff that we see leaking. That type of 4-year-old, 3-year-old, newer polyethylene PVC that a shell might go over. But the cast iron AC, we were at the side of somebody hit with structure.
I'm just trying to find ways, are there things, it sounds like we are doing the right things to be able to monitor our infrastructure as closely as possible to avoid a disaster, right? Because it sounds like regardless of the manganese, regardless of what we find when we drill, we know our well down here is reaching maximum life expectancy. It doesn't mean it's going to go out tomorrow, doesn't mean it's going to last, it may last 20 more years.
Absolutely, yeah.
Mathematically speaking, the one thing we know is that this thing down here, it's an elderly citizen and it needs to be.
Yeah. If its capacity is decreasing, that's the one to watch.
David, thank you very much for being here. We certainly appreciate working with you, receiving your report, and I'm sure we'll have other questions as we move forward.
Well, I'm always available to you. If you guys ever need to reach out, please do. You can reach me as well. So thank you guys very much for having me tonight. This is very detailed.
Thank you. You want to address anything? No?
I was just going to add one more thing. Just in the conversation between the well and the distribution system, the well is the supply of your system, and it's the one piece of infrastructure that if it fails is your supply. The distribution system, if a failure happens, it's more of a small section. You're not talking about the supply to the whole town. So, relatively speaking, your production is kind of, it has more weight than the distribution system because the failures could occur, and we don't have evidence that there's nothing to show that breaks have been happening in the distribution system. That's all I was going to say. But thank you, guys.
Thank both. I think for being so much. Thank you, David.
Yeah, thanks for your patience and all your time.
I would say, Bia, that, we've talked a lot in this town also about preserving the small town atmosphere. And when we met with David, he had told us, your water pipes are failing when they start breaking. And to me, that's a big city problem. Nothing says you're a big city more than aging infrastructure that you didn't take care of. And you can see it in Jackson, Mississippi. You can see across the lake. Half of Jefferson Parish lost water for a couple of days when their main broke. So for me, I don't want to wait and then say, oh, well, we spent all this money on something else when we should have been putting it aside to handle what's more important, which is really the water system. I don't think there's anything more important in town.
And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you.
You bet. Next thing on the agenda is operations and maintenance. Council members is Councilman Ogle, Councilman Dennis. And the one thing listed there is the sign ordinance amendment. The sign ordinance amendment was last addressed in December, and we were waiting for submission from council to Mr. Danner to make any final changes. We thought when we put it on the agenda in December that it was finalized, or maybe November, that it was finalized. But it seemed that at that time, there were other questions about that sign ordinance. So all I have to report is that nothing has been received by the town hall. I've not received anything. Deidre has not received anything from you, and I don't think Mr. Dana has received anything from you. So nothing's been done. It's there just to, I don't know where we're at this point. So without any additional information to report to you, unless we receive something, we're not going to do anything more because we don't have anything more to work with.
Mr. Mayor, can you bring up that picture, Deidre? The one thing that I remember that we discussed was whether or not there should be a small sign allowed at these short-term rentals. So, and we specifically talked about this business because
I don't know what you're referring to. I wasn't aware of this.
this is,
Is this something that was on the agenda?
it's the sign ordinance. So,
No, but this picture, I don't know what it is.
I'm going to describe it for you in a minute. I think everybody knows what it is, but it's a house that's on Main Street. It's the Grace Midwifery. We talked about it at the last meeting. So I just took a picture of it. To me, this is, and the ordinance currently allows home businesses to have a sign like this. It doesn't allow the bed and breakfast or the short-term rentals, but that's the only other thing that I would suggest in the ordinance, that we allow a sign like this. And I think this was in the ordinance for 12 inches by 24 inches. I didn't get up there with a ruler to measure it, but to me, this looks, it looks nice in town. If it's used to identify a bed and breakfast, I think it's helpful. That, somebody in town might say, hey, I want to go stay there one day. Or if they're coming into town and don't know where it is, it helps to identify the house that they're looking for to check into. So that's the only other thing that I would suggest in that ordinance.
Don't we have also a limit on the number of bed and breakfasts and the number of short-term rentals, right?
Yeah, 5.
Short-term is 5, bed and breakfasts are how many?
There's no limit on bed and breakfast. I don't think. No. But again, all I'm asking you to do is submit your request so that we can put it on the agenda with the changes that you're making to our last proposed ordinance. I mean, when it was submitted, I went into that meeting thinking that it was introduced the month before, and I thought it was going to be approved. And then all of a sudden, more discussion came up. So if you'll submit your request, we'll include those, and we'll introduce it at a future meeting. Do you have something to answer?
Dean, would you please resend that? The proposed ordinance we have right now.
When you make your suggestions, be as specific as possible, okay? Because I don't want to have to guess, and then we have another day of discussions and changes and stuff like that. If there's an error or something in the specific suggestion, then I'll point it out.
Mr. Mayor, I did post that subject on Kristen's Facebook page and just told people, hey, look, this is going to be at the meeting tonight. If you have some comment to make about it, can't make it to the meeting, text or email me. I didn't receive any input from anyone else.
Well, so if you'll just be very specific as to what your change would be, and submit it to Deidre, she can pass it on to Bruce, he can include it. And if anyone else has anything else, does everyone have a copy of the last? You're going to resend it to the entire council? Okay.
Thank you, Deidre.
So is that allowed then in the current ordinance, that sign?
Yeah, it's allowed for a home business. It is not allowed for short-term rental. That's my suggestion, just that we allow it for the short-term rentals. I think it looks good, and I think there's some benefit to it.
Yeah, and another thing, I mean, there are a couple of houses that have names, right? I think Amy and Ronnie have a name on their house, and if the house down by the graveyard has a name. All we would like to do is have consideration to be able to put up a sign for our Airbnb. It's gonna be allowed everywhere else. And if not, then that's, we can make it without it, but it just seems like a very easy change.
Okay.
Do we
Moving
know
to Parks and Recreation, I'm sorry?
the ordinance that we're speaking of that allowed it for home businesses, but not for short-term rentals? When was that? Do we know when that was last updated? Any idea? The only reason I'm asking that is I would assume at that point in time, there was no such thing as short-term rentals here, right? And so it was,
Why don't you just add short-term rentals into that, that's where we're going with the conversation, so that would be the, that's right.
Short-term,
No, but we have the ability to have 5.
but we have availability for 5.
point that I think what we have in place right now, the rules we have, which we have found with a lot of our ordinances, they were written before a lot of the issues we have, and then they go back and adjust them because times have changed over the last 80 years, right? So I was just saying, that was probably put together before such a thing even existed.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
I think it was just an oversight when the Airbnb ordinance was written. We didn't talk about signs.
Moving forward to Parks and Recreation Committee members, Councilman Haddix, Councilwoman Faison, anything for tonight's meeting?
Not so much an update on the plans that we have, but there was a topic brought up at our last meeting, and I kind of wanted to just share with everyone that I did end up reaching out to the legislative auditors and then the Attorney General, which I have not heard back from the Attorney General yet, mostly on the verbiage in the 1965 sales tax ordinance. That was the equipment for public works. I think it's worth getting clarification on that. I've been given mixed instructions on if we would need a resolution or not to request that official opinion from the AG. The legislative office essentially unofficially said she doubts that. It's Jennifer Shea. I don't know if anybody else has dealt with her. She said she doubts that the equipment for public works refers to things such as wells or water towers, et cetera. But she said I would actually defer to whatever the AG's opinion is on that. I don't think it hurts for us to go and get that formally stated one way or another, to continue moving forward one way or another as well. I haven't heard back from them. I did ask Bruce tonight what his experience is there, and he did say that they take a long time. So, my first question for them was, do we need a resolution to request this? I'd hate to wait a year and then find out that we need a resolution. So it may just be better for us to go ahead and make a resolution if we wanted to vote on that. Maybe have that presented at our next meeting, to just formally request it. That way we have it if we want to get the opinion from them. And I don't think it hurts. I think the wording in the ordinance is it could be interpreted one way or another, and I would like to get their legal opinion on the matter. Do you have any questions?
Let me just make this comment, though. Remember, it's a legal opinion. Their opinions have been struck down before, okay, by the courts. Not necessarily in this case, obviously, but...
Right. But I think using their opinion is probably a good rule of thumb. Right? Yeah, thank you.
Public Safety Committee members, Councilman Dennis, Councilman Bounds, anything?
I have nothing.
Okay. Entertain a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Hey, Gene,
Councilman Dennis?
one
Yes.
thing, if you don't mind, this is real short. I think Barney even pedestals. It seems that we rented spaces that were too, I guess the space between pedestals was too narrow for the length of the boats that we rented there. And it became a big issue. We had to relocate some people and it could have been a problem. So my suggestion would be maybe on your whiteboard, put down the lengths of the boats that can fit between each pedestal, because that became a big issue and a couple people got mad and Barney had to come down. So just FYI.
Okay. Councilman Dennis made the motion.
Second.
Councilwoman Faison, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.